As an internationally recognized speaker, coach, and trainer, Reg Malhotra brings the best out of his audience and helping them to find what is real for them to change and transform. From feeling suicidal in his earlier years, then later on feeling unfulfilled in spite of having financial and relationship success, Reg has used the most ruthlessly powerful personal change tools to transform his life and many others around the world. He's a man on a mission to create change on this planet and help people to live a life on their terms. Reg, I'm so grateful to have you on Stress-Free Solutions today. First off, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great and I'm very happy to be here.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited because you talk to teams, and that's also my bread and butter. People in corporate tend to be overwhelmed and stressed because they have so many things to check off. And I was wondering for you, how do you manage your stress when you have so much on your plate?
Yeah, great question. Sarah, to me, I'm going to start by saying stress is, let's say, technical, if not a fancy term for fear, right? Of
Mm,
course, when corporate and we're working in organizations, we're not going to call it fear, right? But underlying stress is a fear of, say, something going wrong, a fear of loss, less or never. So there is two aspects to this really. One is you as an individual, right? Someone who's what is happening inside of you, what has been your history, your work history.
right.
Where have things gone wrong? And what are you carrying inside of your neurology in terms of fears and limiting beliefs and limiting decisions? That's one aspect of it. And of
Mm,
course, then there's the other aspect of, how you show up to work and what are your methods? What are your systems? You may have heard of this saying, you never rise to your desires, you fall back to the strength of your systems.
mm,
Right? Do you have good systems? Do you have risk management systems for both for yourself personally and in the work context? So I'm a really big fan of systems. I obviously, a lot of my work is about internal systems. What happens when you react to something? Do you choose to respond instead? Do you choose to stop? Those are all systems.
right.
Some people believe in hard work. Some people believe in guesswork. I believe and I really promote frameworks.
Was there a time where you weren't using systems to assist you and it completely left you stuck?
Absolutely. I think we've all been there. I was there for an extended period of time where, a lot of things were handled emotionally. It's
Mm,
how you feel is how you respond, right? We've all been there. And if someone says something or someone does something around you that doesn't land well with you, and we would respond accordingly, that was very much a response in the moment as opposed to based on a system of thought processes, thinking. So I've been there both in my personal life and professional life. And as you can imagine, when you have an untrained mind, you can damage relationships. You
mm,
can damage opportunities because you give in to your feelings.
yeah.
Feelings are important, but you are not your feelings.
Mhm.
Need to create that separation. Honor the feelings, but you are not your feelings.
What I think is unique about you versus other NLP coaches that I've met, you're big on energy. Can
Yes.
you share how you use that in your work with your clientele?
Sure. A lot of the work we do at Neuromasters is around helping people unpack what's going on. I love this term, unpack what's going on. So when you make a decision or not make a decision, when you feel motivated, when you procrastinate, there is a series of steps that happen inside of you. So we help people unravel that and in control of that. The other aspect of what we do is, if we're going to help people move forward, then we have to make sure there is resolution on events, limiting decisions, and we call
Mhm.
them significant emotional events. And that can happen in your workplace, private life, relationships, that there is a level of indifference, if you will. That's the term I will use. It means you can observe an event, you can have a connection with it, but you're not necessarily, a term we call is associated. I mean, it doesn't all the time bring up emotions inside of you. And in doing that work, we realized that people have a lot of energy stuck on events from the past. It's pretty human.
Mhm.
Right? Oh, that happened when I was 7 years old, or when I was 15, or when I was 23 at a workplace. And as you notice that when people talk about it, they're associated. Means it's like they're reliving that moment because
Mm.
the brain know the difference in real and imagined. And this led to the idea of energy cube, right? And I'll speak about that in a moment. But where I landed up was, after working with thousands of people, that your energy is infinite, but your nervous system needs energy. Even an emotion, if you will, one of the simplistic way of saying is energy in motion.
Mhm.
And because your nervous system and your mind does not know the difference in real and imagined, if you think of an event from the past and your emotion come up, that means your nervous system is keeping it alive. It's alive and it needs energy to keep it alive. And that's why I started to really delve into energy as an aspect of who we are. Where is our energy stuck? How is that energy not available to move forward? Because to create any project, whether it's his podcast, whether it's a business, whether it's a relationship, whether being a mom or a dad,
Mm.
you
Yeah.
need immense amounts
Lots of
of
energy.
energy.
Mm.
Talk about the life force energy. I'm talking about the mana. One of the things we teach people in our school is, introduction to ancient Hawaiian huna. And the ancient Hawaiians had a very simple concept. Whatever drains you, whatever, you know what leaves you feeling lifeless. You need to do less of that.
Mm.
And whatever inspires you, motivates you, has you have more energy, do more of that. And one of the things that keeps your energy stuck, and I am adamant about it, is after work, all walks of life, is significant emotional events, SEEs from the past. That's why energy is a very important part of what we do.
Now, with energy cubes, what does that entail? I'm just like thinking 3D, it's more three-dimensional. Does that have some part of it?
Yeah, energy cube was a metaphor, if you will, a metaphorical idea to make it very simple for people to understand. And I have feedback from around the world that it's that moment when it clicks for them, why they are struggling, why they are suffering, why they make progress and they go back.
Mm.
Money, a lot of people make money, but they go back to their prior identity when it comes to money. With relationships, there's a lot of ping pong. People are running away from abandonment and they're running away from intimacy. So I thought, what is a very simple way of bringing this concept out? And think of a Rubik's Cube. And let's start with one side of the cube. It's just basically a square with tons of cubes.
Right.
Imagine that to be a larger size. And the way we present it is, let's say that represents all the units of energy that is available in your nervous system at a given point in time. And then the way we represent this is you come in here from birth, and let's say 90 plus or 80 plus, whatever it is, the bottom right hand of the grid of the cube. And then we represent that as you're going through your life, say something happens when you're little. For me, there was a house down the street that blew up. I was like 5 or 6 years old. It blew up in flames. And even as a mid 20s something, when I was in my 20s, I remember telling that story to somebody and I had fear coming up. Can you believe it? 20 years later, so when we explain, we said, okay, now let's say that event happened there, and I cross out a few of the cubes, depending on the nature of the event and how much emotion comes up. Let's say a few of those cubes in the grid are no longer available because they need to keep that event alive.
Mm.
So that everyone visited, I feel that emotion. And so on and so forth. Get to the age of 8, mom and dad had a fight. Maybe a kid beat you up at school and you keep going. And then teenage, let's not even go into teenage. I think people have shame incidents, sexual matters that they cannot reveal to anybody. These things, they stay alive, things they cannot tell anybody. Girlfriend, boyfriend matters. Then you grow. And so as I'm doing this, I'm crossing out cubes as we go. Not all of the cubes. Some events will take away 3 cubes, some will take 5, some will take 1. Then you have a problem at your workplace, right? Bad boss, or you got fired, or you made a huge mistake. And let's not even get started on marriage. I
Mm.
mean, there could be emotional abuse, there could be child matters, there could be so many events. And then we get to our 40s and boom, you have a disease or Mr. COVID comes along. That had a huge impact on people,
Right.
right? There's a major catastrophe in the world almost every 7 to 8 years. How do people respond to it? How much have they done the inner work? How much have they trained themselves to respond to it? Because have you noticed during those periods, some people really thrive and some really go down?
Yes. Yeah.
Then we look at the cube at the end of it. There's like 15 to 20% of the cubes that are actually available. How do you create a life from there? It's like driving a car with the handbrake on.
Yeah.
That's the theory behind that. It's all, it's been talked about in the book that I've just put out, Energy Cube Secret. I'm very passionate about it.
No, it's incredible, and it's a unique perspective and way of looking at things because I'm a visual person, so just visualizing that cube and the different segments of it, and
Yes.
we really do return to a lot of these significant emotional events
Yeah.
and relive them over and over again. I have had many clients that have told me, especially with relationships, it comes up in work and it's hard for them then to communicate what they're feeling, what's really going on. So, how can you mitigate that when there is this event that triggers you at work and you're feeling like, is there nothing I can do? Or should I say something or should I keep my mouth shut?
Mhm. Yeah, look, our nervous system is complex in so many ways, and yet it's so simple. There is a concept that comes from neurolinguistics called anchoring. Pretty simple. If in a certain workplace, a certain person, you know, caused you, if I can use that term, a certain negative emotion, that person or that part of the office, it can even be an object, or that scene
Mm.
acts as an anchor and it can keep returning you back to that emotional state. I don't wish to go too woo-woo here, but I hope that's okay for your listeners. I think
Yeah.
it's to understand. Yeah. So we get anchored and we can return back to the same emotional state. Now, your emotional state is critical in how you respond. If you're not even aware of what's acting like an anchor, first you got to become aware. Did something happen there that caused you a cocktail of negative emotions, hurt, sadness, anger? You need to understand what your anchors are. Now, there are processes in our field that can be used to collapse these anchors.
Mhm.
It's a neurological process. You have to do the work. But at a rational, organic level, certainly becoming aware. And then putting yourself through some coaching, asking yourself, what else could this mean? Is this now real? Or is this my nervous system responding? Other techniques like asking yourself, this is what I really like. What is the worst case scenario? What is the best case scenario? And then what is the most likely scenario? You see, it's all in our head. So we run around thinking that something will happen if we communicate it. So preparation is the key, right? And are you anchored to this? Now, there's one more thing I want to mention here, very interesting concept for your listeners. We call this limiting decisions, not limiting beliefs. When a intense negative event occurs, you can end up making a decision consciously or unconsciously. I'll give you an example. When I was in high school, I went an audition for singing and I did a really bad job. I didn't even know how to hold the microphone, but I was just one of those kids who will just give everything a try. And there's a bunch of, girls standing at the back of the auditorium that had a huge laugh, walked around the school and they were giggling. And for a teenage boy, that's like the closest thing to death. So as I look back, and that moment, I experienced a cocktail of emotions: hurt, anger, sadness, fear, you name it. Those are some very heavy emotions.
Yeah.
As I look back, I made a decision at that point in my life. A decision was made that I cannot be seen, or I cannot speak publicly, or I cannot be on stage. Can you believe
Mm.
that? I've spent the
Interesting.
in the last 10, 15 years on stage, and prior to that, I couldn't even contemplate it. So I use these Jordan techniques that I teach to disconnect the emotions from that specific event. So the decision itself disappears. This is so powerful, what I'm sharing here, Sarah. Now, Of course, it's better to do it with the techniques, but if you want to, some people, depending on the intensity of the event, can do it rationally, organically. They can go and observe the event, ask themselves what are some of the decisions they could have made about themselves, about others, or about possibilities, and are they true any longer? And this is a magical question for your people. What else could this mean? You can certainly apply this in the workplace as well, with events that happen in the workplace. Have you made a decision about yourself based on an event? Is that serving you anymore? Because that could have happened 5 years ago. It could have happened in a different workplace. It's so interesting, right? I've worked in a lot of corporations, Sarah, and I've worked in C-suite roles in the past. And I worked with a lot of CEOs and directors. And one of the things I realized was, and I read that some 70% of CEOs face a level of imposter syndrome. Can you believe that?
Yes, only because of the people that I have trained over the years, but it blows my mind because they have worked their way up and they have so many people that respect them, but they're still afraid that the success will be taken from them or again, kind of
Yeah.
events from the past. Yeah.
Events from the past. I think it's pretty human in a way. Um,
Mhm.
or not being aware of it limits you. So becoming aware of it, what is the fear below that? And for a lot of people, I work with a lot of CEOs and being a CEO myself now, I think people carry this fear of getting caught out because there is this idea of perfectionism that we grow up with, that we must know everything. What if people see that I don't know the answer and that I'm no longer qualified? And I think there's a bit of that, and it comes from the past. It comes from the way we're conditioned through school. It's A or B, it's pass or fail,
Mhm. Yeah.
all of that.
You were just talking actually about you being able to speak on stages by eliminating that thought process. Does it ever revert back for you though? Do you have any sort of insecure thoughts that come back when you speak on, let's say, a bigger stage than a previous one that you've been on?
For me, absolutely not. For me, it's a categorical no. Because you've got to do something inside and then you've got to do something outside. Okay. That's the real secret. A lot of
Mm,
people talk about inner work. So first you go within, examine it, you do the whatever processes you have to disconnect emotions so that that event no longer rules who you are and what you're going to do. So that process was done. Now you've got to go into the real world and do something that confirms that change, which I did. And then I did it over and over again. You can put me in front of 10,000 people or 5 or 100 people, right? Because the
yeah.
decision is no longer operating. The limiting decision, the fear is no longer operating. So of course, in the practical world, preparation as well. I mean, you can be the best of what you do, but preparation plus opportunity is equal to success. You
Mm,
can't go for, you can go and if I'm going and talking about brain surgery and I've got no idea and I've done no preparation, sure, I may come across as confident, but at some point, just something will kick in that says, "Hey, I'm being I'm not prepared, and I'm fooling these people," and that could
right.
bring up that's a different issue.
Hmm. Yeah, and that can bite you in the butt in the end, which is not good. And also, if you are that CEO, then you're going to have a lot of problems in the long run because people will stop trusting you because
Right.
it's no like and trust, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of my current companies that I'm working with. And one of them has been having, we do improvisation work in companies. So we'll go in and use improv techniques, teaching them yes and. So I'm just trying to think of like, how can people start to yes and themselves more by working internally and then expressing themselves outwardly?
So, can you repeat that? How can
Yeah,
people?
sure. So, how can people start to work internally and then
Yes.
be able to express themselves more outwardly?
Yeah, great question. I think whether you're in corporate, whether you're a leader, whether you're a mom or a dad, or you're a business owner, you know, eh, how much inner work you do and to what degree and what type can depend on the context. Like, as you know, a business owner, typically business owners end up doing a lot of this work because the buck stops with them. The business can never outgrow the inner engineering of a founder. Unfortunately, a lot of business owners don't know this, and that's why 80% of businesses don't last beyond 3 to 5 years, because
Mm,
the business is an outward expression of what's happening inside. Doesn't matter what kind of business it is. In a leadership role or in whatever role you do, where you're not responsible for other people, it's a different type of inner work. You still need to learn about yourself, what motivates you, know what gives you more energy. And the other key thing is communication. This is critical. We say in our school, I say it actually a lot, probably oversay it, and I have no problem with it. All problems are communication problems.
mhm,
So notice your communication techniques with others. Notice what happens inside of you. This is also part of the inner work. You see, the words we use actually change people. I could say something to you right now that could become your story for the rest of your life, and it could run like a 15-minute loop tape and can completely change your outcomes and behaviors. I've had people say things to me that had me stuck for 5 years. Can you
mm,
believe it?
mm,
Because words have a direct connection to how we feel.
mhm,
So, first place I'll start is, what is your story about you? Let's start there. Let's make it simple. What is your story about you? We call it self story. We all have a story, but we don't have a sub down and written down. Write
mhm,
down every single thing you identify as. This alone will give people breakthroughs. Okay, I'm a mom. I'm a nice person. I'm not a technology person. I'm this. I'm that. I'm a people person. I am this. I'm American. I often ask my students to do this, and they have like 5 pages. You identify as that many things, not realizing those are all your functions. So I think people should first understand how they identify themselves,
mm,
get a clear picture, because one of the greatest forces in the human psyche is the desire to remain consistent with one's identity. Applies equally in your workplace. When you go into work, how do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as someone who, I was talking to someone the other day, said, I'm a troubleshooter, Reg. So what do you mean? Oh, I'm just one of those people. If there's a problem or there's a trouble, I'm onto it. I love solving it. They identify as a troubleshooter.
yeah,
If they were asked to take on a certain role that is, for example, responsible for a team of people, but there is no daily problems or troubleshooting, they could end up not enjoying it or not getting the best out of themselves because they identify as that.
mm,
So that's where I would start with inner work. Identify who you are, identify your strengths and weaknesses. There are some other things people should find out as much as possible about themselves. Do the Myers-Briggs test. Are you ENFP? Are you INTJ? You must know that. You must know where, and that doesn't
mm,
mean you're locked in your or how are you more predisposition? Become a master of tapping into your strengths.
mm,
Then eventually find roles or look for opportunities that is a direct match. It's not that hard, but a lot of times people are driven by survival. They'll go, oh, that sounds good. And the second part, very important part, is values. You see, our values are stored kinesthetically in our nervous system. What's important to you, Sarah, may not be what's important to me. And that's what clearly creates two different entities. Your family may be your number one value. And in the context of your work, troubleshooting may be your number one value. My number one value is energy.
mm.
Number one. Anything I do should involve transferring energy, should involve playing with energy, should involve receiving and giving energy. So that's how my whole business is decided on that. So identify your values. Simple question you ask yourself: what's important to me in the context of work? Keep, keep getting it out, and then there's a hierarchy in which they're stored. And then ask yourself, how much of my work or my personal life, whatever you're doing the values in, how much of my life is aligned with my values? My gauge is, if 80%, you have no choice but to shine. The executive function of your brain is locked in. Prefrontal cortex, everything. When you're on your values, you know. Unfortunately, most people live other people's values,
Mm.
other people's definition of success. And they don't even know. And that's why they're wondering what's happening. What is your values?
So important.
Because when you're living in your values, it just comes out of you like effortlessly. And that
Mhm.
will happen in the workplace as well. Ask yourself, what is important to me in the context of my work? If it's 20% of your values are being actualized through your work, you're in a lot of trouble.
Right. Have you noticed that around this time, people are big into goal setting and then they start to lose it around this time? How how can we do a better job of tapping into our values to achieve the
Yes.
goals we actually originally set.
So our philosophy and our thinking on this is that goals are harder to achieve when your values don't support them. So say my value is people in the context of my work. For example, I'm not going to sit on a computer all day on my own. It's just not my thing. It's not my value. My value is people. I love helping people. I love encouraging people. I like building teams. I like helping people get unstuck. So you can see the people I know. In fact, it is one of my top values in the context of what I do. Now, let's say I set a goal this year that the goal is that I'm going to launch a project, AI project. Let's say I'm going to make it very relevant, AI project. Sure, it could be relevant to business. But if I'm not feeling motivated, if I'm not taking enough steps, if I keep procrastinating on it, it could be simply because there is no people element involved in it. I must
Mm.
choose to delegate this. Otherwise, I'll do a half-ass job. So when you're setting goals, best thing to have them set aligned with your values. Now, let's say you're setting a health goal. Then you could say, Reg, health is not my value. Then you make a decision. Is that something that should be one of your values, especially if you're not healthy? Now, there are techniques, at least in our field, that we can help you install the value in your nervous system. There are other organic ways where something can become a value to you, but typically involves a significant emotional event,
Mm.
positive or negative. If you have a major significant emotional event, your values get shuffled sometimes. Look at people's values got changed through COVID. A
Mhm.
lot of people out to the country, they changed their jobs, they spend more time with their family because there was a material value shift because that was a significant emotional event, depending on what part of the world you are. A lot of the things you thought were taken for granted were taken away from you. A lot of the things you thought were a no-brainer, that's how it is. A lot of people had to do things they never imagined. Huge cocktail of SEs, values shifted. That's not how you always want values to change. What happens when someone gets extremely sick? Suddenly health goes up in the value system. But if you want to be proactive about it, you must do some work to create new values, and then your goals will be met. That's why the dropout rate at the gyms is extremely high in the first couple of weeks of January, because health is not a value.
Yeah.
For people, it's not. They just think that I'll wing it, but you can't wing it.
You can't wing health. No. I was a Pilates trainer for many years, and that was the number one thing I'd always see people super excited to come in January. They would schedule their appointments and then they just wouldn't show up. And they're like, it has nothing to do with you. I don't have the time. And I'm like, you're not valuing yourself, your health, but it is their decision ultimately, right?
Yes. One of the quick ways of knowing your values also is to look at it's a more, I wouldn't say it's a superficial way, but it's definitely gives you a hint. Look at where your time, money, and energy is going. It'll tell you what your true values are. Fortunately, for someone like us in this field, we've taken a lot of responsibility for our life. I remember I got so busy over the last couple of years. I run like 19 live events a year. I mean, that's almost half crazy, right? That I love work so much. Spreading the message through content, all this sort of stuff on the internet. We have teams. And there was a point which I realized there was so much travel occurring. Suddenly I noticed health dropped from my value system. It dropped in the hierarchy. I could actually watch it happening.
Hmm.
And I noticed, and I always have a rational, we got to focus on this, got to focus. But no, I noticed that health dropped a little bit. Fortunately for me, I have the exact tool I need to elevate it up the hierarchy so that I'm not. What does the value do? Then you don't have to consciously try. You wake up in the morning and something is urging you to go for that run. You're naturally. That's the power of values. So I was able to reinstall health at a higher level of the hierarchy. And these are the things they don't teach us in life. Nobody's teaching. It's all in schools.
When people they'll fall out of it, then they get stuck in that pattern of saying no to themselves.
Mhm.
So what can get them to start saying yes, and I'm going to do this for my health, or yes, and I'm going to communicate clearer to my boss? How can we make this shift?
Sure. First part is awareness. There's a concept in our field we call pattern interrupts. Let me give you a little story here. This lady goes to the supermarket and she takes a little boy with her every time. And a lot of the time, most of the time, he would when they would pass the candy aisle, he would start asking for the candy, and she'll say no. He said, no, you're not having it. Their moms do that, but you'll do that at some point. And then they'll say, why? And you'll say, because. Right? It's a very, by the way, the word because is extremely powerful for that. That's a different story. Anyway, so this kid, what he started to do was he started to lay on the floor on his back in the aisle, and he started to throw a tantrum. Sorry, I hope my voice didn't get disrupted there. I went back a little bit from the microphone.
Oh, yeah.
And he started to throw a tantrum. After a while, it was pretty annoying for the mom. It was very embarrassing too, right? Because he's throwing things, he's yelling, no, I want candy and all this sort of stuff. She learned some of these tools. And you know what she did once? One time, he was doing that on the floor. She put the cart on the side. She laid back on the floor on her back and started to say, no. Guess what happened? The child just completely stopped, froze. If at the peak of a pattern, you bring in something new that interrupts the pattern, that something new becomes part of the pattern. What do you think happened to the child? Anytime going back to the supermarket, as he was probably thinking of trying to do that again, the image of a mom came in, and the intensity was severely reduced. It doesn't work anymore. Now let's map that across to your question. First, recognize what the pattern is. Like you said, if it goes on for long enough, it's no longer now what you do, it's who you are. It's a pattern. It's an what do you call it? Auto repeat.
Yeah, auto repeat.
Auto repeat. So recognize that. And initially, unless you are doing some techniques like neurolinguistic hypnosis, there are some fast track ways that can interrupt the pattern for you. If you're going to do it consciously, you need to decide that when I'm in that mode, I need to do something different, something that would be the complete opposite. For example, if your pattern is when there's a group of people, you shy away and go to the photocopier, or you go to the coffee room or whatever, you may have to decide, I'm going to go over and say hi, as uncomfortable it is. You do that, my prediction is you do that 3 to 5 times, that will start to come into the pattern. But you need to, just like what they say, anything you fear, if you go and do it 5 times, the intensity of the fear is 80% reduced. Why? Because that new behavior is part of the pattern. And it's going to require willpower. But if you want to do it outside of willpower, then you have to do subconscious mind processes. They also work. They're faster.
Wanted to leave the audience with one last question, and this is more personalized for you. How has stress saved your life?
How has stress saved my life? Interesting question. Can you give me more context on that?
Yeah, I love that you asked that. So, all the time, we are told that stress is a bad thing, and sometimes it is. It can be, but for the most part, it can also either help us pivot or it can help us see something clearer, or maybe it wasn't necessary for you in that time period.
Okay, I do love that question. No, that's a great question.
Yeah.
There's 2 aspects to this. One is the fear aspect, which I said at the start of the episode. Fear is an indicator. It is a signal. It is actually meant to serve us. It's meant to tell us there's something we need to change, something we need to do new, or something we need to, remove. Unfortunately, a lot of people probably have not evolved to that level unless they've had certain life experiences where they dance with fear all the time. There's that element that is good about stress. If you look at stress as fear, it's telling you something needs to change. The other element of stress, I'm going to call it structural tension. As I look back at my life, anything great that I've created or changed has been a result of that structural tension or friction.
Mm.
Like there is some level of resistance to the current or discomfort. Even though things may be feeling comfortable, we may find ourselves coasting. The human being has a very interesting design. We talk about this as part of our framework. We call it the universal model of change. Let's think of 4 positions. Position A, when you're comfortable. Things are going fine. You have a job, money's coming in, you got a partner, things are fine. Fortunately or unfortunately, the human design is more complex than that. When we've been in a comfort zone for long enough, something happens and we become uncomfortable with what is. Some resistance comes into what is happening. This design is in place so that we continue to discover and create more. Otherwise, why would we even bother with AI? Why would we go to the other planets? Why would we rockets. Something is there that makes us become uncomfortable with the comfortable. We're going to call this position B. Some people can be in position A for 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years even, because of their values, their stories. But B will inevitably come in. It happens mostly in intimate relationships, with career, and in a lot of people, it happens with life routines. Now, B, people can end up staying in this position B of discomfort, of resistance, also for a long time. Why? Because they're trying to go back to A, the comfort zone, but they'll keep ping ponging. Something is, and this is where a lot of marriages come into question. Now, some people will fall from B. So think of a line like that. A is here, B is here. I'm not sure.
Mm.
Will this podcast be on video?
Yes. Mhm.
So for anyone watching this, think of A here, B here, straight line. You move from A to B. And some people will drop into C. Think of like a line going down. Now, C is the problematic situation, because if someone is in C for a very long time, it can become the point of no return. Homelessness, disease, divorces, drugs, substance. That's a lot of the C going on. Now, at this point, the person will try and go back to B. Right? Think of the B is up here, C is down here. They're trying to go back. Think of a man just trying to go back up that hill to B. But they're trying to solve, this is called symptoms. The root cause is not being solved. They might try and get up there, but they'll go back. See, this is a problem that happens to a lot of people. I've worked with a lot of people like that. Now, for some people, the sufficient change in neurology, belief systems, values, thought processes, events can shoot them up to a new position. Let's call it D. So now you've got a line like that. Then you've got a line going down, C, and imagine like a triangle. But this time the line going up is higher than the level at which A and B are at. Now this is called, you've got new neurology. You've got new response systems, new ability to solve problems. And from D, eventually people will come back to, let's call it A1, new position of comfort zone. And I always use this
Mm.
because that's effectively one other way of explaining life for human being. So going back to your question, that structural tension, friction, or stress that can occur between B and C or at C, it can either send you to a point of no return, but if you've evolved enough, if you had enough, if you have the right self stories, you can jump out of it by using that friction, that stress to create something different. And this is my story. When it's happened, initially there is this point of why me? Then for me, I'm sufficient. My neurology is sufficiently developed now to change that why me to try me.
I like that. For you personally, because when I said this at the very beginning or when I introduced you, I saw that you had suicidal feelings. And I know that's a struggle a lot, not just in America, all over the globe now. Because
Yes.
I don't know if it's because of the pandemic, it has opened our eyes to it more. But if you don't mind sharing, how were you able to get out of that point, which is could have been the point of no return to, I know you have your practices, but for the people out there, I just felt that was a way to connect the dots.
Thank you. Yeah, at the time that was happening inside of me, I did not have the practices. It was a result of extended periods of low self-worth, not understanding self, having poor relationships, everything being questioned inside of me. And one of the things I say a lot of my training sometimes is, it felt like, by the way, for me specifically, everything around me looked unhappy. I couldn't see a successful relationship model. People would talk behind each other's backs. It was like, and I say this in my trainings often, like, it was like life is meant to be unhappy. You just choose what level.
Mm.
Remember when I say this and I ask people, how many of you felt that way? I think 80% of hands go up. Life is meant to be unhappy. Or like, Lord Buddha figured out that the experiences of suffering, it's just what level you can suffer at. Now, not having any strategies to deal with it, not having perhaps the right level of guidance and not seeing things changing, can often lead you to what we call as suicidal. It's like, you don't understand anything now. Why do I even exist? So for me, to be honest with you, it was purely coincidental that I did not feel that. So I would arrive at the point and I knew, or I felt I knew how I would seize my existence. But at the point of wanting to do it, the courage was diminishing. Like it couldn't do it. And I look back in my life, I think it later on only I realized from a spiritual perspective why I could not succeed at that. That's a very spiritual idea that I was not meant to succeed at ending the existence. It just couldn't happen. I tried, but it couldn't. Right. So there is that level of courage that was lacking. I couldn't put into words. The story was going on, but the
Mhm.
courage was not there. That means the story was superficial. I just had to develop more internal resources and fight the good fight. You know what they say? Everyone is fighting a battle we know nothing about. Somehow it was more coincidental, to be very honest with you, that because I couldn't do it, I kind of got on with it. And that getting on with it, the void still remained, which led me on the search for answers. So rather than trying to end it all, it's like, what can I do? What I started, instead of focusing on the people who are unhappy, I started to focus on the people who have a spring in their step. Well, what are they doing inside? This is
Mhm.
how eventually I led to the field of study that I'm in. Because this whole field of study was based on the idea that if you can find out what Sarah does inside, her values, her beliefs, her meta programs, we call them inner programs, her self story, how she holds her physiology, what her body does, and how she motivates herself, what is her self talk. If I can find that out, I can get the same results as you in less than 50% of the time. But I have to install it inside myself. That's how this field of study came, because the co-creators of this field, NLP, for example, they went and I think it was with Tony Robbins. They looked at a bunch of snipers there at, I don't know, can't remember, the FBI or CIA. And they took the top one and they found out every single thing he does inside. They utilized that to then install it in a bunch of other snipers, and they started to get similar result, 99% accuracy. This process is called modeling. So
Yeah.
what I'm suggesting here is that at some point, something strong enough led me to focus on the people and the ideas that do work than the ones that don't. So if someone is feeling suicidal, I'm not a
Mhm.
suicide prevention expert. I'll say that up front. But if someone has been feeling lost and feeling like, due to events from their past, here are the sequence of events that my recommendation, this is not professional advice, that I've found work in a lot of people. Number one, settle the past. Create a level of indifference. You can do that rationally, or
Mhm.
you need to utilize certain techniques. It can be really, really fast so that you can look at those events in your life. It's not about deleting the memories. They make the fabric of who we are, but you don't necessarily have energy tied to them.
Mm. Mhm.
That's a step one. Step two, you need to start focusing on what you want. They did a study with 20,000 people or 2,000 people, I can't remember, over a 20-year period. And the ones who succeeded spent 80% of the time thinking about or spending their energy on what they want and how to get it. How do you do that when your whole story is related to your past?
Yeah.
First, you got to decide who you are, get your values, all the things we spoke about, what it is you want, get specific about it, take steps towards it, micro actions daily, and your energy is tied up to that. And I think the initial part can be hard for people. So there's an order and sequence of this. And then, of course, you need to have your brain exposed to visuals, auditory, kinesthetic, which is called feelings, to people whose life's results you'd rather have than not have. A lot of us don't have a choice with that, with family and things like that, but you got to get into groups, communities, people, coaches, mentors, shows. Your brain needs to be exposed to this material over and over and over again until it becomes you. It's not easy, but at the same time, it's not as complex.
Right. Reg, how can people connect with you and learn more about your practice, everything that your team and you do, and maybe even have you to speak?
Look, you can people can check us out. I have a company, I'm CEO of a company called Academy, Neuromasters Academy. There's a specific website for neuromastersacademy.com. Go and have a bit of a look, see if that resonates. You can book in a call and get some free resources and videos and audios that can start helping people. From there, book a call and get a chat with one of our master practitioners who can consider where you're looking to move forward, change something, where the roadblocks is. and either guide you in the right direction or recommend perhaps some of the programs that could have immediate impact. Outside of that, for your listeners in particular, when I go to a podcast, I've decided if somebody will listen to this, will experience changes because of this, is willing to make the changes, then I'm more than happy for them to come through my personal Instagram channel, which is Reg Malhotra Official. DM the word, we'll call it Sarah24. DM the word Sarah24, and my team will organize a specific video resource that will help you further, both with the energy cube and something that is more actionable. If you come to the private account or Reg Malhotra Official, Sarah24, you'll need to put that word so we know you came as a result of listening to this show, because then we would be more than happy to reward them. If they want to talk about some speaking opportunity or they'd like to address a group of people around leadership communication, that's a topic I'm really passionate about right now, is how does a leader get the most out of other people? Communication is a big aspect of that. I'll certainly be able to deliver a very impactful talk. In that case, again, go through neuromastersacademy.com or regmalhotra.com website and just lodge in an inquiry from them. Would like to have a conversation with Reg about potential speaking. That's the best way I would go about it.
Thank you so much. And we can also, I'm going to have your book in the show notes too for anyone
Yes.
that would like to go and purchase. I just want to
Yes.
say thank you for sharing your knowledge and also being vulnerable and just being here present with me. It's been such a delightful conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Remember, everyone, to be kind to yourself on this self love journey. Until next time, take care.